My name is Megan, and my wedding nearly became a war zone. My parents called it a shame, and they demanded I change everything, from the venue to my dress. But they had no idea what I was really planning. Ever had a moment where you had to stand your ground against family? Tell me your story. The meeting felt off from the moment I stepped into the room. The air was thick, charged with tension. My parents, both of them sitting at the head of the table, looked at me as if I was about to break some terrible news. Instead, I was just trying to keep my composure. "You know, Megan," my dad began, voice clipped, "this wedding is an embarrassment. Your choice of venue? It's a joke. The style, the guest list? It's not what we expect from our family." His words hit me like a slap. I didn't say anything at first, just sat there, frozen. It wasn't a surprise, this had been coming for months, but hearing it said out loud, so bluntly, made my stomach twist. Mom's eyes bored into me. "You're making a fool of yourself. You're supposed to think about the family, about how this reflects on us. You can't just do whatever you want." Her tone wasn't angry, just disappointed. The kind of disappointment that feels heavier than any accusation. "You need to change the location. Cancel the caterers. The guest list is ridiculous, and we don't even know half of them." I could feel my chest tightening. This was supposed to be my day, my decision. But there they were, telling me what was right, what was wrong. Like I wasn't capable of knowing the difference. Like my choices didn't matter. "Mom," my voice barely above a whisper, "I've already made all the arrangements. It's too late to change things now." Dad leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You think we're just going to sit by and let you ruin everything? No, Megan. This wedding, this whole thing, it's not about you anymore. It's about our reputation, and you need to fix it." The words hung in the air, thick with judgment. I hadn't planned for this. There was no preparing for it. I had envisioned a quiet conversation about the final touches, not this onslaught of demands and criticisms. I wanted to fight back, to yell at them, but all I could do was sit there, paralyzed. They looked at each other, probably expecting me to apologize, to give in. But the truth was, I was done. Done with feeling like I had to apologize for wanting something of my own. Done with letting them control every part of my life. I wasn't their puppet. Not anymore. "Fine," I said, standing up abruptly. "I'm keeping everything the way it is. The venue, the guest list, the food. I'm not changing anything. This is my wedding, and I'm going to do it my way." The door slammed behind me. The aftermath of that morning's conversation weighed heavily on me. But it wasn't just the fight with my parents that lingered. It was the silence after, the coldness that followed me everywhere. Every time I walked into my house, every time I picked up the phone, it felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mom and Dad didn't stop. Their calls became more frequent, their criticisms sharper. Every choice I made was met with disbelief, followed by the familiar sighs of disappointment. It was always the same routine. Each decision was either wrong or not enough. My dad would ask why I didn't just do things the right way, and how we always know better. Mom's constant refrain was that I was ruining everything, that I was disrespecting everything they'd worked for. I'd hear her voice shaking, but her words would never soften. "You're making a mistake, Megan," she'd say. "This isn't how things are done. Why can't you just listen for once? It's not about you anymore." And each time, I had nothing to say in response. It was like trying to convince the wall to apologize. But the pressure didn't just come from them. It came from everywhere else, too. At work, people started talking. There was always that one coworker who couldn't resist a comment, no matter how subtle. I could tell from the glances, the small smiles that lingered just a little too long, that they were wondering if I was making some huge mistake. It wasn't obvious, but it was there, the quiet judgment hanging in the air like a fog. One afternoon, as I walked into the break room at work, I overheard Sarah, a colleague, speaking to Emma. I wasn't meant to hear, but the words were too loud to miss. "Can you believe Megan's keeping her wedding the way it is? Her family's not even involved. I mean, that's just sad, right?" And then there was Alex. Thank God for him. He was the one person who didn't try to change my mind, who didn't tell me what I should or shouldn't do. He didn't care about my family's opinion, and he wasn't interested in what the office was saying. He was my grounding force. "Still dealing with them?" he asked, as we sat on the porch one evening, drinking beers. I nodded. "I don't know how much longer I can handle it." He took a slow sip, considering my words. "You don't have to handle it. You can choose to let go of their expectations." "I can't. Not yet. They're my parents," I said, almost apologetically. "It's not that easy." Alex looked at me, his expression softened but firm. "You can't keep living your life for them, Megan. You've tried it their way for years. How much more of this do you want to take?" His words hit harder than I expected. The truth was, I had been living for them, hadn't I? I had spent my entire life trying to be the daughter they wanted. But now, as I stood at the edge of my wedding, with everything hanging by a thread, I realized how much of myself I had lost in the process. "You're right," I said, though it felt strange to admit it. I don't want to disappoint them. I never have." "And you don't have to," Alex said with a shrug. "But you've got to stop letting their idea of you control everything you do. You're your own person. Do what makes you happy." It was easier said than done, of course, but hearing him say it, in that straightforward way, made me feel like I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. The next few days, I couldn't shake his words. But even though I knew deep down that I should stand firm, the guilt still lingered. Every time I picked up the phone, I felt like I was betraying them. They hadn't raised me to be selfish, had they? But then I thought about the wedding, the one that was supposed to be about me and Daniel, about what we wanted, not what my parents or anyone else expected. The vision I had for it was mine, and I refused to let that be overshadowed by someone else's opinion. It was time to make a choice, a real one. And for once, I wasn't going to let their voices drown out my own. That afternoon, I called my mom. "Megan, I'm so glad you finally called," she said, her voice eager. "We need to talk about your wedding, about what you've decided to do." "I've decided to keep everything as it is," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. There was a pause. Then her tone shifted, icy again. "What do you mean? We can't just let this happen, Megan. You'll regret it." I didn't flinch. "I'm not going to regret it. This is my choice." The email from the wedding planner came in unexpectedly. It was short, but the contents made my heart skip. The headline read, "Congratulations, Megan! We've secured your spot as the face of the upcoming social campaign with a major corporate sponsor." The words felt like a punch to the gut, but in a way I couldn't quite explain, it was exactly what I needed. The campaign, which I had worked on for months, was getting national attention, and now the wedding was part of the deal. That was why my wedding had been getting so much attention. Because it wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a part of something bigger. The phone rang almost immediately after, and I answered without thinking. "Hey, Megan, it's me. Just wanted to check in." Alex's voice was comforting as always. "How are things holding up? Any better with the wedding chaos?" I could feel the tension in my voice as I explained what had just happened. "Alex, you won't believe this. I just got the confirmation. The wedding's part of the whole campaign. That's why everyone's been paying attention to it." There was a pause, but then Alex's voice came back, calm but a bit amused. "Well, that's one way to get noticed. Guess you're stuck with all those eyes on you now." Stuck. That's exactly how I felt. My wedding had turned into a spectacle, not just for my family or friends, but for a much larger audience. What was supposed to be the most personal day of my life was suddenly tied to a corporate project. I had no idea how to navigate it, but one thing was clear. It wasn't something I could back out of. Later that day, I decided it was time to tell my parents. Of course, the conversation didn't go smoothly. They were already upset, and now I had this extra layer of tension to add. "You what?" Dad's voice rose on the other end of the phone. "This is getting out of hand, Megan. You're making this wedding into a media circus, and for what? A brand?" "That's what it is now, Dad," I replied, my voice more defensive than I meant. "I didn't plan for this, but it's happening. The wedding is a part of something big, and I can't just throw it all away now." "You can, and you will," he shot back. "This whole thing's a joke. We don't even know these people. They're using you, Megan. You think they care about you? It's all for the cameras." I let out a sharp breath, my hands tightening around the phone. It's not about the cameras. It's about what I've been working on. This campaign means a lot to me. It's something I believe in. "You're blinded by it," Dad said, his voice dark. "Don't you see? This is just another thing to ruin your life. You don't need their approval. You need to get back to reality." I ended the call, not willing to listen to more of his anger. It was clear my parents weren't going to understand, but that didn't change anything for me. I had made my decision. The wedding day arrived, and things were tense, but not unexpected. I didn't know what to expect when I walked down the aisle, but I certainly didn't think it would be this. My parents arrived, of course, looking every bit as disapproving as they always did. They sat in the front row, both of them clearly uncomfortable. I could feel their eyes on me, the disapproval hanging like a heavy cloud. I thought for a second I might break, that I might cave and apologize for what I had done, but I didn't. As the ceremony began, I tried to focus on Daniel, on the vows we were about to make. But the moment came, the one I had been bracing for, the MC's announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice echoed through the hall, "it is my honor to introduce Megan, not only the bride today, but also the face of this year's corporate social campaign. Megan has worked tirelessly alongside our partners to bring attention to an important cause, and we are proud to have her as part of our initiative." By the time the wedding day arrived, everything had escalated to a point I couldn't ignore. The pressure from my parents only intensified. They seemed to be everywhere, sending me messages, making calls, showing up unannounced. It felt like there was no escape. Each conversation ended with more ultimatums, more requests for change. "You're not doing this the right way, Megan," my dad's voice boomed during our last phone call. "You're ruining everything. This wedding doesn't belong to you anymore. It's bigger than you now. It's about family, about who you are." His words were blunt, but the bitterness was palpable. "I'm not changing anything," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage simmering beneath. "The wedding is happening as planned, Dad. This is my choice." "Then you're making a mistake you'll regret," he muttered before hanging up. That was the last conversation I had with him before the wedding. But it wasn't the last I'd hear from my family. They were relentless, using every tactic they knew to break me down. But somehow, I stayed resolute. I'd never imagined how hard it would be to stand firm in the face of my family's expectations. The more they pushed, the more I pushed back. But I knew it was about more than the wedding at that point. It was about my life, my future. The morning of the wedding, I woke up to a flurry of messages, most of them from my mom, with her usual complaints and hints that I was making a fool of myself. I didn't bother replying. I couldn't. At the venue, the air was thick with tension. I had already made up my mind, but with each passing minute, the pressure felt suffocating. I kept hearing whispers from the staff and a few family members who had already arrived, exchanging looks and murmurs. The wedding was still hours away, but I could already sense the judgment hovering over me like a dark cloud. When I stepped into the bridal suite, Alex was there, leaning casually against the doorframe. He knew this was the moment. "Everything all right?" he asked. His tone relaxed, though I could tell he was picking up on the anxiety I was trying to hide. I shook my head, frustrated. "No, nothing's all right. My parents are still at it, trying to convince me to change everything. And now they're blaming me for not listening, for not being the daughter they wanted. It's like they think I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot," Alex said simply. "You're doing the hard thing, the right thing. They'll get over it." "But will they?" I asked, my voice cracking for the first time. "I don't think they'll ever get over it. They won't accept me, not truly. They think I'm throwing away everything they've worked for. And I don't even know how to get them to see that this is about me, about what I've built, not some ideal version of what they think I should be." He stepped forward and put a hand on my shoulder, steady and grounding. "You can't make them see it, Megan. You can't change them. But you can stand your ground. This is your life." I took a deep breath. He was right. I couldn't keep fighting a battle that wasn't mine to win. If I kept trying to make them happy, I'd lose myself in the process. The wedding proceeded as planned. The guests filled the seats, the music played, and everything went off without a hitch. But there was a sense of discomfort that never quite left. The tension from my parents still lingered, and the judgment from others was just as heavy. When it came time for the ceremony, I was ready. I had no more tears to shed, no more second thoughts. I was doing this for me, and that was all that mattered. But when I saw my parents sitting at the front row, their faces stone cold, I knew they weren't here to celebrate. They were here to show their disapproval, to make sure everyone knew they didn't agree with the choices I'd made. As I walked down the aisle, I felt their eyes on me. Disappointment, anger, and confusion all rolled into one. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the realization that they had lost control. When I reached the front, I took my place next to Daniel. The ceremony began as it was supposed to, but then, as the MC started speaking, a twist came. One that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice rang out, "we are honored to have Megan here today, not only as the bride, but also as the face of a major social campaign with our corporate partners. Megan's work and dedication to this cause have made a significant impact, and we're proud to celebrate her here today." The room went silent for a moment. I could feel the shock ripple through the crowd. My parents looked like they had been hit by a freight train. The realization that their daughter wasn't just a bride anymore, she was a public figure, had finally settled in. And then the attention shifted. Every eye in the room was on me. For the first time that day, I felt like I was in control. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. But even in the midst of it, I knew there were still so many unanswered questions. The rift between me and my family hadn't been healed, and it wasn't going to be anytime soon. The damage had been done, and the consequences were still to come. But in that moment, it didn't matter. I had taken control, and that felt like a victory. As the ceremony continued, I glanced at my parents again. This time, their silence said more than any argument could. They were forced to accept that I had chosen my path, and nothing, not even their expectations, could take that away from me. The wedding wasn't perfect. It wasn't how they wanted it, but it was mine, and that was all I needed. The day was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it unfolded like a series of collisions, one after another without pause. A planner leaned in to ask about seating changes. A florist waited for confirmation on the aisle arrangement. My phone vibrated constantly against my palm, the screen lighting up before it could even go dark. Missed calls, new messages, then more calls. Across the room, my parents stood apart from the guests, close enough to be seen, but distant enough to feel unreachable. My father stepped away to take another call, his shoulders slumped, his free hand rubbing his temple. When he spoke, his voice carried just far enough to reach me. "This isn't what you wanted." He didn't wait for an answer. The venue buzzed with quiet urgency. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. Someone adjusted a microphone that squealed for half a second before going silent. Each small sound landed too loudly. Alex appeared beside me near the ceremony area. He didn't ask how I was. He just looked at my face, then at the phone in my hand. "Are you sure?" he asked. A nod followed. It was automatic, the kind that comes from repetition rather than certainty. "There's no time left," I said. "Everything's already moving." He glanced toward the guests, then back at me. "Just don't forget who this is for." Before anything could be said in return, someone called his name. Alex squeezed my shoulder once and stepped away. The music started. Everyone stood. The aisle stretched longer than expected. Faces blurred together as I walked, but one pair of eyes stayed sharp. My mother didn't smile. Her hands were folded tightly in front of her, knuckles pale. When our eyes met, her lips pressed into a thin line. Earlier, in a small side room, she had stood too close, adjusting a crease in my dress that didn't exist. "This can still be fixed," she had said quietly. "You don't have to go through with it." Her hand lingered at my sleeve, then dropped when I stepped back. Now, standing at the altar, Daniel reached for my hand. His grip was steady, grounding. When I looked at him, he gave a small nod, not rushed, not uncertain, just there. The officiant spoke. Words passed by without sticking. Rings were placed into waiting palms. Cameras clicked. From the corner of my eye, my father shifted in his seat. He didn't look at us. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, as if bracing for impact. "Do you, Megan?" The question hung in the air. Daniel's thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles. A simple gesture. Familiar. Real. "I do." The words came out clear. No hesitation, no pause. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone exhaled audibly from the second row. My mother looked down. The rest followed quickly. Applause, movement, congratulations that blurred together. A hand touched my back, guiding us forward. Another pressed a bouquet into my grasp. Outside, the noise softened. Daniel didn't say anything. He just kept holding my hand as we walked. His pace matched to mine. Behind us, the doors closed. Alex dropped it like it barely mattered. "You know the corporate partner who sponsored your wedding?" He leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers. "He's the one who helped you get into that campaign. I wasn't sure if you already knew." My foot stopped mid-step. The phone stayed in my hand, screen glowing, then dimming again. The sentence hung there, unfinished, waiting. "What?" The word came out late. What do you mean he helped me? Alex frowned, confused by the question. The guy from the firm. You've been working with him for months. Strategy meetings, media placements. He's been guiding the whole thing. You don't remember? The room felt smaller. Air pressed tight against my chest. Breathing took effort. Months. Emails answered too quickly. Introductions that happened without resistance. Doors opening before I knocked.